皆様、こんばんは。同時通訳を聞くには、Zoom 画面右下の通訳アイコンで音声チャンネルを設定してください。主催は ISIC ジャパン、共催はジェーンズ、制作はブルームパシフィックとバーシテック、支援はアルファベット順で BAE システムズ、L3 ハリステクノロジーズ、ロッキード・マーティンとレイセオンテクノロジーズ、通訳はフィールドとハーシーです。それでは、防衛のための学術研究、日本の国家安全保障への示唆というテーマで、防衛産業フォーラムのモデレーターを安倍政権で内閣官房参与の経験をお持ちの谷口智彦教授にお願いいたします。
皆さん、こんにちは。谷口智彦です。本日のモデレーターをいたします。防衛と学術。この間のリンクは日本において失われたままです。それをどうすればいいのか。アメリカとヨーロッパ、それから日本の4名のエキスパートの方からプレゼンテーションをいただき、後に議論をしたいと思います。1時間15分。時間の壁と言葉の壁をいずれもやすやすと乗り越える安全保障を考える場にようこそ。それでは最初のスピーカーは西山さんです。この方は三菱重工業で長らくミサイル、そしてミサイル防衛に携わってきた日本の防衛産業の中でも大変著名な方です。では西山さん、どうぞよろしくお願いします。
はい、谷口さん、ご紹介ありがとうございます。ただいまご紹介預かりました西山です。本日は安全保障に関心の高い皆様にお話しする機会を与えていただきましてありがとうございます。ただいまご紹介いただきましたように、私は長年三菱重工でミサイル防衛に携わってまいりました。現在は未来工学研究所で研究参与として安全保障、防衛関連の研究を行っています。本日は防衛のための学術研究というテーマですので、防衛産業に携わってきた経験をもとにお話しさせていただきます。それでは次のスライドをお願いします。次お願いします。まず最初に
many years on missile defense at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Now, let me talk about the particularities of Japan. How does academia in Japan view military research? I believe their basic stance is that researchers, scientists, should not participate in military research. One example, on December 11th, Utsunomiya University should cancel military research, their researchers demanded, but the university declined. Now, they're talking about the National Security Technology Research Promotion Fund of ATLA. So we have these actual petitions happening. If I interpret this, this means the basic understanding of academia is that military affairs equal war, and that therefore military affairs themselves are evil. Next page, please. Next page, please. ATLA, starting in the fiscal year 2015, began the National Security Technology Research Promotion Fund. And one cannot deny that this has caused a link with military research. And I think we will have hear directly from ATLA later. But in the bottom of my slide, it says program officers are not to interfere with the substance of research, but the I think academia is very concerned about that point. Next. I'll try to talk about the movements in academia. The Science Council of Japan in March of 2017 issued a statement on military security research, basically saying that they would confirm the statements of 1950 and 1967 and continue to think about the matter. In 1950, the statement was that they would never become engaged in research that could lead to war. And in 1967, they said they would not be involved in research for military purposes. Each university is to set up a system to examine appropriateness, and ATLA has a very high intervention in research. So this expression by the Science Council at a different symposium, the fact that program officers are ATLA employees was pointed out as a matter of concern by academics. I think that this merits some consideration. But if you look at this statement, it basically means that the decisions are left up to the universities. It doesn't clearly say, do not engage in military research, but it suggests as much. Next, please. I'll now talk about military civil fusion in China. It is an aggressive national strategy of China to promote the use of civilian resources for military purposes, and to also use military technology in the private sectors. They especially focus on the ocean, space, cyber, and AI, emerging areas for China. But in 2015, the Science Council of Japan made an agreement with a Chinese university, including one of the so-called Defense 7 children, or a Chinese university particularly involved in national defense. And so the Science Council clearly lacks consistency. Next, please. A point about the US and basic research. In May 2010, Secretary of Defense Carter produced this memorandum. The DoD fully supports free scientific exchanges and dissemination of research results to the maximum extent possible. But there is a condition that there has to be a relation with national security. They're talking about basic research and applied research. And the research results are widely published in academia. Next, please. In pursuing advanced research, the US established DARPA in 1958. DARPA's thinking is shown on this slide. Bohr-type research is purely basic, and Edison-type research is purely applied, but use-inspired basic research is Pasteur-type. In 2014, METI, their Industrial Structure Council, looking at the case of Japan, said that US had 33% Pasteur type and Japan had 15%. This Industrial Structure Council out that use-inspired basic research, Pasteur type research, was not very prevalent in Japan.
で、日本の研究のあり方が問われていると思います。次にお願いします。
Next, please.
時間もないので、簡単にいきたいと思いますが、
I'll try to be brief.
このようにまとめてみました。
Here are some examples of dual use.
軍事用に開発されましたが、
GPS was developed for military use, but it's used in car navigation systems and smartphones for daily use. The internet was also for military use, but it's also indispensable for daily life nowadays. The fact that we're able to meet using Zoom is thanks to that research. Even rocket research, space rockets and ballistic missile technology are exactly the same. This drives home the point that technology doesn't recognize these frontiers. Next, please. How do Japanese Nobel Prize scholars view military research? I tried to look into this. Toshihide Masukawa, in his book, What Did Scientists Do in War? The research awarded the Nobel Prize is double-edged technology. Science is always neutral. If research that can be dual use is totally banned, no researcher would try to innovate in science and technology. This is a dilemma for science and technology. Further, he writes, nuclear power is a summary of all of our problems. It has to be continued. So this scholar is pointing out that, in fact, there are no frontiers in technology. Next. How could we get Japanese universities to participate? When you consider this, I think the US could serve as a model. In the university corporations, they have university-affiliated research centers, UARCs, that are separate from the educational organization of the universities. And the bottom half of the page, you can see that these UARCs contribute to national security and they get funding. For example, the Applied Physics Laboratory at Johns Hopkins University does missile defense research. I'd be grateful if Dr. Schneider could add some points on this. I believe that we perhaps ought to consider such a system in Japan. Next slide. I'll try to sum up. Security is at the foundation of the state and must provide safety and security for its people. National security is comprised of diplomacy and military affairs, clearly. Science and technology is progressing very rapidly in all fields. And in any field, the role of science and technology is increasing. Basic research is something that leads innovation in science and technology. Basic research should be open to the public in principle, but can be restricted if for security reasons. Our neighbor, China, has a military civil fusion strategy, and Japanese researchers should be aware that even if they're working on something that's supposedly a civil technology with China, it could be diverted to military uses. In order to participate in security and military research, we should create a favorable environment in Japan. ATLA and the point of their program officers is perhaps an issue that deserves attention. If we look at systems, the example of the United States could serve as a reference to create UARC-like institutes in Japan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nishiyama-san. We really appreciate it and think it is a very timely introduction to this subject from you. Next, although it's very early in the United States, we will next hear from Dr. William Schneider Jr. In the United States. Dr. William Schneider Jr. Career is introduced on our website. You're welcome to view it there. He has worked in the State Department, the White House, with a very stellar career, which I think you are all familiar with. So then may I ask you, Dr. Schneider, for a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning and good evening. Very pleased to have an opportunity to participate in this webinar. I don't have slides, but I will have some by way of follow-up. Useful discussion. I've been involved with the U.S. research establishment, especially to provide access to the defense establishment to acquire the research needed for its purposes. Nishiyama-san has referred to the some aspects of the U.S. R&D apparatus that integrates academic research with applied research for national security purposes. And one of the aspects of this that's somehow is easy to be underappreciated is that the biggest funder of our basic research is the Department of Energy. It's in some ways it's misnamed in the sense that it might better be called the Department of Science, because the Department of Energy has produced a BTU of energy in its 40 years or more of existence, but it has produced many Nobel Prize winning scientists because of the research it sponsors. The Department of Energy has a network of 11 national laboratories, three of which are weapons labs. But even those, excuse me, have less than half of their research that's associated with its weapons function. And so they also serve as federally funded research and development centers, which is a institutional innovation that was developed during World War II, where some of the major universities were participants in the defense research and development sector, but needed to create an institution that was separate from the educational function of the universities. So Draper Lab, what is now the Lincoln Lab, for example, were created at MIT. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech, California Institute of Technology, is another example of those that were created either during World War II or in the early years of the Cold War, to find a path by which the defense establishment could access academic research, but separated from the educational function of universities. One of the things that we found that was particularly helpful is that these institutions, such as federally funded research and development centers and university affiliated research centers, also proved to be valuable opportunities for students to participate in undertaking research, some of which would have defense applications, but much of it would simply be to build up the inventory of scientific knowledge that the DoD could gain access, but it was also widely shared. There is quite an extensive program of the publications by the university affiliate research centers. And another function of in this layering of research support is with the federally funded research and development centers. During the Cold War period, the US found that it could not get sufficient insights from the defense industry. That is, the defense industry would work on the basis of a contract and would continue to build up knowledge in those areas. But what the government needed was a cadre of experts that the DoD could call on, who did not have the commercial conflicts that necessarily are associated with the defense industry. So the FFRDCs have proven to be a valuable resource for the government because they are the cadre of experts that support the government laboratories. In the case of the DoD, they're mostly associated with the individual armed services, but they're also research support the entire government. The best example, of course, is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which has a very broad mandate, but they have no laboratories, they have no institutional facilities. They do their work by sponsoring research, and to affirm the broad range of their operations, the messenger RNA, which is the technology associated with the COVID vaccines, was originally developed in DARPA about 30 years ago and transferred to a government health agency, which continued the research. But I think that illustrates the point that was made by the Japanese Nobel Prize winner, to the effect that research is neutral or science is neutral. And that is one of the things that has made DARPA a particularly important institution. But I think there's something of value that may be created by the ability to have a layered set of R&D centers that academic research institutions, but are not necessarily part of it. I think we have developed, had something with some experience in doing this, and there may be some scope for collaborative relationships between some of these FFRDCs and the university affiliate research centers to associate with their Japanese counterparts. There's a lot of capability here, and I think there is some interest in doing so. So perhaps I'll end here, and I look forward to taking some further questions on this very interesting subject. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Schneider.
Dr. Schneider, thank you, Dr. Schneider. It was a very short presentation, but very well developed, especially the differences with respect to Japan, I think were obvious to our audience. Now, let's change our point of view completely and look at NATO. Today, we are having participation from Major General Philippe Montocchio from NATO. He's also the Assistant Director for support, and we would like to hear from him today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. As said, I'm French Air Force Major General Philippe Montocchio, and I am the Deputy Director of the Collaboration Support Office, one of the three entities of the NATO Science and Technology Organization, the STO. So can we go to slide 2, please? The STO is a small organization within NATO, 200 strong, which is located in 3 different places, at the NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium first, in Paris, France, where I'm currently sitting, and in La Spezia in Italy. Our mission is to contribute to keep NATO and the NATO nations at the technological edge in order to maintain a decisive and defensive strategic advantage over NATO's potential competitors and adversaries. Next slide, please. Our organization is Professor Theodore von Kamen's legacy, the man in black on that picture. Who was a genius scientist who did a lot for aerospace development. His brilliant idea was to bring researchers and soldiers together to design future defense capabilities. As written in his quote, soldiers do not have the skills to understand all that science could do for them, and scientists cannot guess which scientific findings could be relevant for operators. Therefore, they must talk to each other and cooperate closely. This is at the STO, this is our DNA for almost 70 years. Next slide, please. So Professor von Kamen's collaborative concept has developed over the years within NATO to become what the STO is today. Led by the NATO chief scientist under the NATO nations supervision, the STO conducts studies and experimentations to advise NATO and NATO nations leadership on science and technology in the field of defense and security. Our collaborative business model offers nations a unique forum to cooperate on S&T issues. It is based on the nation's will to share ideas, skills, and funding. Currently, our network of experts comprises more than 5,000 scientists and warfighters who work together in technical groups on 300 S&T activities. These activities constitute what we call our collaborative program of work, and they generate more than 100 technical reports every year. 4 partner nations enjoy a privileged status in our STO community, and Japan is one of them. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the Ministry of Defense of Japan, the Acquisition, Technology and Logistics Agency, and the National Defense Medical College Research Institute are involved in some of our activities. The return on investment is estimated at 10 to 1 by some nations. And my office, the CSO, with its 54 people workforce, provides the administrative and the executive support to all these technical groups. Next slide, please. In more detail, you can see how this network is distributed among the different categories of experts: governmental laboratories, industry, NATO bodies, and academia. Next slide, please. In the STO, our network of researchers is spread across 6 panels and 1 group, addressing different technological fields such as artificial intelligence, data sciences, quantum technologies, autonomy, modeling and simulation, human factors, biotechnologies, sensors, and hypersonics, just to name some of them. Next slide, please. At this stage of my presentation, I would like to consider 2 practical examples of cooperation between the defense sector and academia. The first example is about cognitive warfare. What we call cognitive warfare is a sophisticated way to manipulate individuals or groups of individuals in order to obtain a strategic gain, such as, for instance, political destabilization. It could look similar to psychological warfare or information warfare, but the hyper-digitalization of our professional and private environments and the use of artificial intelligence are changing the magnitude of the manipulation and make of it a truly new type of warfare. The new technologies and the Internet of Things provide new means to reach out to people and to people's brains, spreading carefully designed disinformation in order to alter their way of thinking, also called cognitive mechanisms. Russia and China have developed doctrines related to this cognitive domain and have acquired a great deal of experience in the fields of manipulation, disinformation, and destabilization. So to better understand this hybrid threat and to counter it, different NATO bodies, primarily the Allied Command for Transformation and the STO, currently work with a French institute, the École Nationale Supérieure de Cognitique, and other universities, such as Johns Hopkins, on neurosciences and artificial intelligence applied to the cognitive domain. Next slide, please. My second example is about a new NATO project, the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, or DIANA. And DIANA aims at accelerating emerging and disruptive technological solutions, particularly dual-use ones, to answer critical transatlantic defense and security challenges, connecting to and leveraging existing innovation ecosystems from NATO nations. On this slide, you can see how such an innovation ecosystem is typically organized. At the beginning, innovators ask for the support of an accelerator, a sort of go-between company, to help them find funding, additional knowledge, industrial support for large-scale production, and end users to buy the final products. As you can see, academia and universities are part of this ecosystem, and they usually play a key role in bringing some additional scientific knowledge that the startups might be initially missing to complete the design of an innovative product. Next slide, please. DIANA's global architecture is due to encompass actually several innovation ecosystems that are already available in NATO nations to answer NATO and NATO nations' capability needs. Next and last slide. And this concludes my presentation. For more information, you can either visit our website, contact us, or contact the Japanese National Coordinator for STO, Dr. Tomohiro Ando. I will be very happy to answer your questions if you have some for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
大変ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Very cutting edge issues that you've been able to discuss with us today. I think we have had our eyes opened. Finally, our fourth speaker is from ATLA and is the top person in technology and policy, Dr. Mishima Nishin. Thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you, Dr. Mishima. Thank you for your introduction, Dr. Taniguchi. I am Shigenori Mishima from ATLA, Chief Defense Scientist. So I'm going to talk about this from the point of view of the ATLA, Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency, that is the government standpoint rather than the industry standpoint. My title is, the title of my talk is shown here, Active Utilization of Advanced Civilian Technology at the Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency. I think this, I'm hopeful that this will be a useful theme for our discussion today. This page. I have some background information written here with respect to the current status of Japan's defense R&D expenses. I hardly need to say, but there has been, in order for us to take advantage of our adventures, we need to have aerospace and invest in all sorts of fields, AI, robots, quantum, 5G. All of these fields are being invested in broadly by private companies, and this technology is being globalized. There is a very high speed in technological progress in these areas. On the other hand, our research and development expenses in Japan are, when we compare to various other countries, quite low. In the US, the US is exceptionally high. Japan, in Japanese yen, is on the order of $1 billion. So it's quite a low level, as I think you can see. On the left-hand diagram, you can see the Japanese government's spendings, total research and development, and how much of that is made up by defense. It's on the order of 3%. So it's a very low number, I believe that we can say. Let's move to the next slide. This is the, not talking now about defense, but all research and development trends in each of the major countries. The left shows both the government and private research investments. The US is biggest, then China is catching up very fast, and then EU, and finally Japan. Japan is also, when you combine private industry and government, it's not at such a low level. When you compare this to the defense level expenditures, it's not that low. On the right side, you can see that the government spendings for research and development as a whole follow the same pattern, US, China, Japan. So there is not the difference that you see on the defense side is not manifested here when we're looking at the total. This page, looking for the next page, please. This one, yes, thank you. This is looking at the categories of each country's research and development expenses. The leftmost one The deep color, the deep blue color is basic research. The middle one is applications, and the right is development. Basic research is roughly 15%. The three other on the right graphs again show that on the right you have industries, companies, then universities as the third, and finally on the far right you have public institutions. This was in Nishiyama's talk as well. If we take the idea that basic research leads applied research, that would show that universities are the ones who are pulling this along. And in terms of companies, it may be obvious, but the basic research done by companies is quite low. In this area, we had some reference to this from Dr. Schneider as well. The U.S. Support, what shall we call, spending at the universities, I assume that this comes from many billions of dollars level coming from defense. In Japan, we have the per portion of this coming from Japan's Defense Department, defense industry, to the universities. We also heard about the Energy Administration in the US. I think this is also a relative factor here. Next. I talked earlier about the comparison of each countries. This is directed at the US. We have on the yellow in the left, the 5th Science and Technology Basic Plan, and the right shows the defense plan. This may not be particularly significant, but in terms of the documents, we have this Science and Technology Basic Plan, 5-year plan, whereas we have on the right our defense plan, which is a 10-year plan. Both of these have been determined plans. From the 5 years starting in 2021, we are talking clearly about using technology to answer our defense needs. We also have the integrated innovation on the left. Sorry, on the right, which talks about the need to develop defenses against threats. We have three innovation. We have the innovation strategy, which is developed more on the following page. But in any case, we see the importance of strengthening our technology, underlying technology points. It's more important than ever, which is the technical basis underlying ATLA. So the ATLA is undertaking its own research and development, and considering how we should move forward with that, which is discussed here on the following page. This is this year's version of the Defense Innovation Strategy. This next page, please. I mentioned talking about clarifying what the important technologies are for a think tank's standpoint, and assignment of allocation of resources. Within this year's supplementary budget, we have 250 billion set aside for this. And recently, I talked about the emerging technologies AI, bio, quantum strategy, material strategy, and so forth. These will be included. And in addition, to avoid the leakage of technology, we also have to take countermeasures to that. That is part of our innovation strategy as well. Next page, please. Next page. The next page talks about Atlas' approach to utilizing commercial advanced technologies. The main activities, the largest activities relate to utilizing commercial advanced technologies. Applied technologies. Now, given the speed of technical development, and especially what is being done in the private sector, we need to be aware of this, and we need to support basic technology and pay more attention to its applications. So in 2015, the Blue Innovative Science and Technology Initiative for Security has begun. It's being supported at the level of $100 million a year, roughly. This was talked about by Dr. Nishiyama. Next, we have to take this basic technology and connect it to applications. That was the bridging research starting 2021. Next, after that, we need to more focused on private industry, outsource with this work to nurture new development. That refers to this. The funds we will be providing starting next year, fiscal year, for private industry. What we are doing ourselves is a combination with ATLA. We are now creating new policies which are not limited to the defense industry, but reaching out to a more wide base of commercial industries. Next slide, please. The next slide. Yes, next, please. This also came up in Dr. Nishiyama's talk. I may be repeating him to some extent. What should we call this? As I've written down my points, MOD will not be limited to published research outcomes. In other words, we will not keep things as research as secrets. The program officers will not interfere. There are, of course, intellectual property limitations, but the point is that these developments, technologies can be used broadly. We want to make sure that we develop that system in a very strong way. Next slide, please. This graph consists of data since beginning this system up through today, looking at the number of applied research projects and awarded research projects, and showing how much of this is going to universities, how much to public research institutes and companies. I don't think it's that meaningful to analyze this at this point, but these are the facts, statistics to date. So I don't have a particularly, I have not prepared a summary slide, but basic research, and especially private company research, emerging technologies, all of these, we have to think about how we can combine these into our defense strategy. I talked about innovation policy or strategy a moment ago. That was something which we began talking about in the cabinet 3 years ago, which included the Minister of Defense. So we have that has been well penetrated into the community. So within the community, we are thinking about how to combine defense and technology, and we want to continue to promote that effort. And thank you very much. That concludes my talk. Thank you very much, Mr. Mishima. Of the things that you have heard, the ATLA changes at ATLA, this is all something that's been happening in recent years, that those facts may not be known very well to people overseas. We would like to now move to question and answers. First of all, from the 4 panelists, we would be interested in hearing any additional comments, questions that the panelists may have for the discussion that they've heard from the other panelists. For example, General Montequillo, having heard what are the additional things or questions you may have about the Japanese defense establishment or integration of technology situation right now?
Yes.
Do you have any comments?
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me the floor again. From a NATO point of view, what would be absolutely key for us, as Japan is one of the 4 closest partner to our scientific and technology organization, is to well understand exactly the very topic of this webinar. That is absolutely interesting, fascinating, and very important for us to really understand the kind of relationship that you may have between the governmental defense sector, the industry, and the academia. Because from what I could hear today, you have, I would say, relationships that are quite different from what we could witness in my country, in the US or in UK or even Germany. That could be also an interesting country to look at, with also an interesting history and I would say very particular relationship to the defense industry. So I think what I heard was very inciting, and I think this is going to help us to understand exactly the relationship you have between those different stakeholders, so we can probably better tailor the partnership and the involvement in Japan of Japan into our own network and our own activities, if Japan has the will to expand its contribution to the cooperation with NATO. Thank you very much.
General Montequillo, ありがとうございます。
General Montequillo, thank you. Having heard that, I would like to ask Dr. Mishima again. There was a concrete proposal to use third-party program officers from Dr. Mishima. These 2 points, as well as will foreigners and other participants be able to use this funding? And if so, where can that information be obtained? I think we've received a question from the floor about that. If we could ask you to maybe give some supplemental comments on that. Thank you. Program officers, first of all. We currently, in terms of the funding system that we have right now, we determine the themes and we get proposals for research and review those. So we have employees in our own research lab serving as program officers. that's how we are looking at this right now. But in the future, it's possible that we would extend it in the way that you mentioned, but we have currently highly skilled people in our own research laboratories that we would use for that purpose. That's how we think of it right now. Another Nishiyama's proposal included a US type UARC in Japan. I have also studied at US University. At that time, I discussed this with a professor and asked them about this. He said, I cannot answer that question. He said, I said, well, you wouldn't be able to say that in a US university because they're free. So, of course, in the university, you have an atmosphere like that. Whereas Nishiyama-san talked about Johns Hopkins Applied Research Physics Research Lab, where he has worked. There are clear university employees with clearances and properly secure university facilities. So a system like that, I think it needs to be used in combination as a set, free, in other words, university, and also secure. But now 6 years have passed since the implementation of this system, yet we're still searching for, we need to have higher efficiency. We need to have the ability to respond in Japanese language. So that's the current status. But in the future, we do think that there could be the kind of possibilities. We want to examine those that were suggested by the audience member. Thank you, Mr. Mishima. Of course, when we talk about cooperation with foreign countries, it has to be something which countries who we are limited to, countries which we have total trust for. It's hardly needs to be said. Now, I want to again thank Dr. Schneider for his participation at this very, very early hour for him. And I want to ask your opinion, Dr. Schneider. You have a very long relationship with Japan in your career. Japan, how do you think Japan's defense policy has changed over the years? You have been viewing this from very up close. What does the Japanese current situation look like to you? Have we made a great amount of progress, or do we still have a long way to go? And if you had to say what the next step was, what would you say you think the desirable step would be? If you don't mind, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Thank you very much for the question, and they are very pertinent. And I think there's been an enormous change in Japanese defense policy and the underlying process of converting Japan's great success in the applications of science and technology to national purposes, including national defense. The much greater involvement of Japanese technology in the innovation in defense capabilities is very important, and this is also an issue that's affected us in the United States, in that there's been great concern that we have not been able to innovate quickly enough to be able to create new defense capabilities. And there may be some experimentation in the US that might be helpful to Japan. In order to accelerate the conversion of science and technology into defense capabilities, the Defense Department created more than 20 rapid acquisition organizations that can fund the creation of prototypes. This, of course, moves the technology along more quickly into a specific application. However, one of the things we found is you have what we call a valley of death, where you fund the R&D, you fund the prototype, but there isn't money to move from a prototype to an actual defense capability. And Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, Heidi Shu, has developed a new innovation, which will probably be published in the FY23 defense budget that will be publicized in January. The concept that she is proposing is that they will take all 20 or so of these rapid acquisition organizations and discuss them with the users, that is the regional combatant commanders, the Indo-PACOM, EUCOM, CENTCOM, and so forth, and have them identify the capabilities that have been created by these rapid acquisition organizations that have prototyped these products. She will have a fund of about $250 or so million to adapt these new technologies that have been cited by the combatant commanders as most important to their mission, and advance them to the point where a military department could then initiate its acquisition process to acquire the capabilities. This, say, is all part of an effort to move more rapidly from science to product, or science to capability. And I was very pleased to hear Mishima's comments about interest in innovation, because I believe we could have some shared capability that would be of great value to both of our countries. And I would add one additional point that a questioner had raised about foreign participation. The US law and regulations are moving to increase the opportunities for participation of highly trusted allied countries who have modern capabilities to assure security. The US law has already been changed with respect to the UK, Canada, and Australia. And there's a lot of interest in arranging a similar approach with Japan that would, in effect, make these countries part of the US industrial base. I think these areas are fruitful opportunities for a discussion and finding perhaps innovative institutional ways to bring these the capabilities of all of the allied countries together effectively. So I think we're in a very good path, and Japan is I think on a very productive path as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Schneider 博士、どうもありがとうございました。今の
Thank you very much, Dr. Schneider. I noticed that Mr. Nishiyama was nodding his head several times. Tell me what parts of what Dr. Schneider was saying you found interesting. In the you mentioned in your presentation that the number of universities was gradually growing who are participating in this initiative. Could you mention that perhaps in your discussion? Thank you. I was listening to Dr. Schneider's comments and nodding my head. You are correct about that. Emerging technologies how we should use those, how do we take advantage of those is a very difficult issue. And from the technical standpoint, we don't do everything from the technical standpoint. We also have to look at what the operators need in terms of what technology they are looking for. That was also mentioned in General Montokyo's original slides, I believe. So prototyping indeed is necessary, and then the operators have to try it and then make changes as quickly as possible. I think that's a very effective approach. In the US, they are already making efforts in that direction. I think it has to do also with the procurement systems, things like that. And I want to think about how we can make similar efforts here. Also in the US, in the R&D area, we want to have discussions with them on this problem, on the level of assistant secretaries of defense, that kind of thing. And then the other thing was, what was it? I've forgotten. Yes. Oh, yes, it was the applicants from universities, that has been growing. I don't, it's not something I could maybe describe as a trend, but certainly there have been good proposals, many good proposals. So as I said a moment ago, we have lots of limitations. So we are working on this gradually. We have we sponsored a symposium and things like that, from which speeches, talks, where we have made exhibits at different talks and conferences, colloquiums, that kind of thing, where we have interacted with professors, and I think we can continue to do that. I want to next ask Dr. Mishima, this is a question from the floor, 6G, 7G, the next generation developments. How are we doing with those? Cybersecurity, in particular, funding with respect to cybersecurity research in Japan, how is that? What is the status of that? US, EU, is there a way that we can cooperate on those in that area? If you would be kind enough to answer about that. Yes, 5G, 6G, the original network technology, communication technology was led by the military originally, but as you know, the private industry is now moving ahead very quickly. So there's issues of acquisition ability, but we want to use this. I think it's very important to use this industry technology. We have a research lab within our defense establishment that is able to review this technology, and we are going to work with private industry on that. With respect to cyber, the Ministry of Defense's mission is to protect our own defense, our own facilities. So we have to look at how well we can protect ourselves from cyber attacks, and work with private industry again to do that. We are undertaking research efforts in that area. Private industry technology, and when we talk about foreign countries, there may be various efforts made. We still, in terms of ATLA's efforts, do not yet have not advanced very much with respect to foreign countries. From Nishiyama-san, do you have a comment? If we could have a comment from you, I think we'll probably be out of time at that point. If we could ask any concluding remarks from you, Mr. Nishiyama.
Very good. Thank you. I don't have concluding remarks per se, but I do have something to add to the conversation. And Mr. Mishima has always been answering here, but about the program officers. ATLA has such employees, but the universities are saying that the presence of these program officers in itself represents intervention. So even if they are not intervening, they're bothered by their presence. And so my impression is that they're hoping something can be done about that. Now about the UARCs. This is not really the Ministry of Defense, but it's the government overall in thinking about how research ought to be set up. There would not be a Japan Ministry of Defense Research Institute, so I think the UARCs is a big subject that requires the attention of the whole government. And from the gentleman from NATA and from Mr. Schneider, we heard about rapid prototyping and about how research should be set up. We got some good suggestions, but whether it's myself or the Japanese Ministry of Defense, the situation in the US and in Europe is something that we are quite familiar with, but we don't manage to implement it in Japan. We have seen quite a bit of change in the past few years, and the Japanese Ministry of Defense has created this system to promote research. I hope we can accelerate it. Listening to Mr. Mishima's presentation, R&D expenditure is not particularly high in Japan, but if you especially look at defense R&D, it's very small. We really need to get the Japanese public to understand this issue. I feel that I learned myself as well by listening to you all today.
シュナイダーさん、それからモット・キヨさんのような、素晴らしいエキスパートにアメリカとヨーロッパから。
We really, Schneider-san, Mishima-san, US, NATO, Japan's Chief Technology Officer, Dr. Nishima, and our representative, US Japanese defense contractor with such long experience, Dr. Nishima, a very blue ribbon panel. However, I think there are still many questions that remain unanswered. Why is the US academic community so uncooperative? It requires a long explanation. But in Japan, we have the power of the Communist Party, which is much greater than I think people. It's much deeper established in academia than people realize. The Communist Party's power since the Gray War, and also in each of the parties, it was finally under the Abe regime or administration that we were able to get to the point that we are. Now we have the Kishida power, which is increasing the defense budget. So starting with Mr. Mishima Atla, Chief Defense Technology Chief, we have a very high responsibility, but we have a very high opportunity, which we hope that they can take use of take advantage of for creative collaborations that we should be able to conduct in the future. Listening to today's session, that's what I was thinking. I want to thank everyone who participated in the organization of this session today. I would say that as a representative of the audience, as always, the wonderful two interpreters who gave us their best efforts as good interpreters. I want to thank them with my claps. So I will then, with this, like to end today's session. Thank you very much.